So, last week I forgot to announce that I will not be recording this on Thursday due to it being Rosh Hashanah. So, let me take this opportunity to just sort of map out how the next bunch of weeks are going to go. I'm recording on Wednesday today. I will record on Thursday next week. The following 2 weeks I will record on Tuesday or Wednesday before Chag. And then the first 2 weeks of November, we are actually in Israel. So that needs to be determined how I'm going to do that. The last week of October will be on the Thursday. So again, it's all archived. You can go to my YouTube channel, Sandra, Saundra Epstein. You can check Facebook. I'm sure there are ways to get these Parsha discussions. This Parsha is Ezeinu, and just as setup before I launch into it, I've always been very aware of people with different abilities and using different senses in ways that accommodate whatever the lack of or the disability or the impairment is. I remember one of my heroes when I was very, very young was Helen Keller. And I was very touched by the fact that they asked her, if you could see or hear, which would you prefer? And she said, I would prefer to hear, because communication is what connects you to everyone. My sight, my not having sight, I've been able to accommodate by touch. And I learned this from a friend of mine in college, Rabbi Michael Levy, as we would walk on campus at Penn together when he would come to visit, that there are ways to accommodate. And certainly as an educator these many decades, I have been very dedicated to accommodating and to modifying learning materials and lessons and experiences for those who are differently abled, as my friend Elliot Dorff explains in his wonderful exposition of what it means to accommodate all people who are in fact differently abled. So I've entitled this particular parsha in honor of Ezeinu, give ear, Ozen, here, Ta Shema, Ta Chazi. Now, all of us who have done any study in the Babylonian Talmud, in the Talmud Bavli, are certainly familiar with the phrase Ta Shema. We're just even familiar with it in general parlance. Come, hear, come, learn, Shema. Come and listen, come and learn, come and absorb. It has even slipped into our shared jargon as a common and oft-used term in our general community of Jewish learning. We may not necessarily be as familiar with the phrase Ta Chazi, or as it appears in the Talmud Yerushalmi, Ta Chami, come and see, learn, and absorb. Chazi, chazon, vision, to see, to absorb through seeing, through witnessing. A case is often made that this latter phrase is preferable, as it invokes the notion of having witnessed firsthand what is about to be conveyed. To see something, to witness it, counts for something. In fact, in Masechet Chagiga, where it says, and all should come and appear and see and be seen, this is very, very important to witness with one's own eyes. I was struck by this preference for Ta Chazi and Ta Chami when I heard a lovely Devar Torah when we were in Paris for Shabbat this past August, and I've decided to incorporate that within this discussion of Ezeinu. This dynamic of Ta Shema or Ta Chazi, Ta Chami is part of an ongoing sense of often profound discord between the two traditions, that of the Talmud Bavli and that of the Talmud Yerushalmi. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense because Talmud Yerushalmi is in Israel and people saw with their own eyes what was going on. Whereas Talmud Bavli, people had to be dependent on what they heard, on what was passed along. Rashi himself opines that the Babylonian scholars were disrespectful towards one another, and that their studies were doubtful and not always intelligible. Perhaps this was due to what they heard and then interpreted, but did not experience or see with their own eyes firsthand. Rav Yirmiyahu himself referred to the Babylonian scholars as Tipshei Bavel, the fools of Babylonia, on 5 different occasions. In one example, Rav Yirmiyahu says again, "Foolish Babylonians, because you live in a dark land, you state laws that are dark. Bavli tapshi mishum divei ba'ara de chushcha amritun shematata demach chushchu." Your teachings are dark. And here Rashi comments that when the Babylonian scholars do not understand something, they are accused of inventing an answer out of nothing. I'm not sure that we should take Rashi's word here. I don't. But the point could be made that working with a tradition that one heard may not carry the same weight as personal experience. It is interesting to see that the Maharal of Prague wrote similarly, that in his opinion, oftentimes the Bavli takes the view that any answer is plausible. And this may come from as our history has gone on, and we are certainly experiencing it today. We see periods where various voices and various opinions and various approaches are more acceptable, and periods of time where that's not so, where we get very siloed and very stuck in one way. And this ebb and flow certainly is reflected in how these many opinions that are presented in the Babylonian Talmud are taken. The main thing, says the Maharal of Prague, was to present an answer or an approach. While we celebrate this aspect of the Talmud Bavli here, it is being called into question, or at least into some sense of accountability. So what do we do with this information that we learn, that we hear, that we see? How does this impact how we learn, how we live, how we look at things, how we listen when we hear something, even while listening ever so carefully? It has been posited that the Yerushalmi is a purer form of law than the Bavli, in the sense that it limits the discretion of the judge to interpret the law according to his evaluation of clearly set and stated judicial principles. In the Bavli, however, the judge is given far more latitude to take into consideration extra-legal factors and extenuating circumstances. We see this in the Bavli many times, where it will say, according to me, or according to this person, or given the situation here, that these accommodations are made because it's understood that there's not uniformity in people's law. For example, in laws of business, there's a whole host of conditions that are laid out in the Talmud Bavli and then repeated in Rambam's Mishnah Torah about what do you do with monetary exchange depending on where you live, depending on, is it a Jew, is it a Gentile? Do the majority of the people that live in that neighborhood subscribe to this system or that system? And how much is each form of money worth in the other systems? We have to take into consider these extenuating and differential circumstances. We often learn that there are adjustments to be made out of kindness, so that, for example, financial losses are limited so that more people can participate in the community, so that relationships with other people outside the Jewish community can be more positive, and so on. It is even suggested that the ability to do so, to function within this sense of elasticity, is what facilitated our survival in so many situations and in so many different sets of circumstances through these years that we have experienced them. It is not surprising that these dynamics would be found in the Talmud Bavli, as this is our record of how Jewish life continued and adapted outside of Eretz Yisrael, clearly not the case with the Talmud Yerushalmi. In other words, the Babylonian judges governed more by the prudence of men than their Yerushalmi colleagues, who limited the role of the judge to the simple application of the law as they saw and experienced it with their eyes. And to make this point, in many circumstances where there are various chiyuvim, the soma, the one who is visually impaired, is not obligated or cannot do certain things because they don't see it. So we see this dynamic throughout our laws. Why am I bringing this up at this point? Our Parsha is called Ezeinu, listen or give ear. This is a less intense iteration, Ezeinu, of the notion of Shema, whereby we listen, absorb, hear from our hearts, as Rabbi Shlomo Riskin teaches. Shema. Hear from your innards. He indicates that the word Shema is actually an onamonopia, reflecting on how it sounds and how we listen with our innermost beings. Similarly, let us consider the phrase Ta Chazi. It's not Ta Re'eh, just to simply see, but Ta Chazi, to vision. That would be the more intense form, just as Shema is for Ezeinu. Re'eh, interestingly enough, was the name of our Parsha several weeks ago. Chazi refers to vision, something seen, if you will, with the inner eye, just as Shema is listening with your inner being. In other words, these phrases, Ta Shema, Ta Chazi, are not about occasional sights and sounds, but rather intentional engagement on a deep level with what we are involved. Here, matters of Torah instruction. As we begin chapter 32 of Devarim, we notice that Moshe is at the end of his journey, but the Bnei Yisrael are just beginning a new one. These words are intense. They are desperate even. Ezeinu hashamayim v'adabra v'tishma haaretz imrei pi. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. As we have said in the past, heaven and earth are often called to witness the word of God. My lesson will drip like rain, kematar, dew that we need, right? Tal, matar. My word will flow like dew, like storm winds on vegetation and raindrops on grass. When I call out the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. Havu gadol, godel, le'Elokeinu. The deeds of God, of this mighty rock, Hatzor, are perfect, for all God's ways are just. A faithful God without injustice. God is righteous and upright. Destruction is not God's. Hashachat lo. It is his children's. It is God's children's defect. You crooked and twisted generation. Dor ikesh upitilta. In these few words, we see Moshe's frustration, which is reflective of God's frustration, no doubt. As God had been the voice for Moshe, now Moshe is voicing God's concerns, as Moshe will no longer be available as the interpreter or the representative of each party to the other. No sooner does Moshe complete his oratory and the many sobering and troubling lessons of disobedience and rebellion than God is once again the speaker. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe be'etzem hayom hazeh lemor. And God speaks to Moshe on that day and says, go up to Mount Avarim, to Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab that's facing Yericho. See the land of Canaan that I am giving to you. Umat bahar asher ata oleh shama. And you will die on that mountain. You will be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died and was gathered to the people. Because you have betrayed me. You have betrayed me amongst the children of Israel at the words of Merivah Kadesh, where he struck the rock, and because you did not sanctify me in the midst of the children of Israel. From afar you will see the land, but you will not come there, to the land that I am giving to the children of Israel. To be sure, many find this text disturbing and even grossly unfair. The causative nature of verses 50 and 51 can be seen as particularly problematic. Clearly, Rashi takes this view. Because you betrayed me. Geramtem lim obi. You caused the people to rebel against me. Because you did not sanctify me. I said, Vidibartam elasela, speak to the rock. And you did not. Instead, you hit the rock. In other words, indicating that there could have been a causative effect from what people saw versus some occurrence from what one would hear. However, let's widen the scope a bit. Where did Moshe falter? Not with words that the people could hear, Ta Shema, but rather with a maaseh, an occurrence that they could see, Ta Chazi. He may have lost vision of the future. The loss of sight, of vision, is a theme in our Torah, seen with Yitzchak, with Yaakov. When sight and vision are lost, there is blackness, confusion, loss of direction. Moshe could no longer provide this direction, though he could continue to speak and share what people needed to hear. Ta Shema. In our Haftarah, in Hosea, chapter 14, we see this stumbling which pervades Israel. Shuva Yisrael ad Hashem Elokecha, ki kashalta ba'avonecha. Return, Israel, to the Lord your God, because you have stumbled in your iniquity. Kechu imachem devarim, take words with yourself and return to God and say, teach us, forgive us, help us be better. We need to see and hear, to visualize and to deeply listen with our entire beings. Ta Shema, Ta Chazi. I love this statement when we say, I went through this text, whether it was the Gemara, the Mishnah Torah, a Parsha, etc., and then we're asked, but wait a minute, did it go through you? In other words, are we carefully listening with our heart and soul, as we say in the Shema daily? Are we visualizing and visioning into the future, thus gaining a better understanding of what we are confronting at the present? Judaism is an active and engaging way of life. It is so significant that a good number of our parshiot begin with action verbs, indicating that Jewish observance is not passive, but active, 24/7 present, involving all of our senses and ongoing initiatives and activities in which we engage. As we read toward the end of last week's Parsha in chapter 31 of Devarim, V'ata kitvu lachem et hashira hazot. Now write for yourself this song and teach it to the children of Israel. Limda et bnei Yisrael. Sima bepihem, put it in their mouths in order that this song will be for me as a witness for the children of Israel. When I bring them to the land which I have sworn to their forefathers to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey, they will eat, they will be satisfied. But then, upana el Elohim achavim va'avadum, uba'atsuni va'afer briti. They will get too comfortable. They will turn to other deities and serve them, provoking me, violating my covenant. And it will be that when they encounter many evils and troubles, this song, Ezeinu, this song, will bear witness against them, for it will not be forgotten from the mouth of their offspring. For I know their inclination of what they are planning to do today, even before I bring them to the land which I have sworn. We end our Torah with free will and its complications as we began it. How does God know? If God knows, then do we have free will? How do we explain that the free will that God gave to us and therefore cannot correct our misdeeds, but we must go along and act according to our choices because that's who we are as human beings? What calculus do we do that brings that together with God being timeless, being omniscient, being omnipresent, being omnipotent? They will read this song and they will not be able to claim, wait a minute, if we'd known all of this, we never would have transgressed God. V'yiktav Moshe ta shira hazot v'yom hahu v'yilamda et bnei Yisrael. And the last verse of last week's Parsha, Moshe wrote this song on that day and taught it to the children of Israel. And we read this song every year on the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, where we are in this space, where we are thinking, where we are approaching Yom Hadin, where we are thinking about our actions, what we see, what we hear, how we pay attention, how we don't. Actions, actions, and more actions. That is what our Jewish living is about. I often share in my multi-faith work that Judaism is so expressed through mitzvot, through deeds, Christianity through faith, and Islam through submission. These are clearly not mutually exclusive, but the point is that Jews show their faith by submitting to God who created us through the doing of mitzvot. We are truly people who respond to both Ta Shema and Ta Chazi. Look with your inner eye. Hear, understand with your heart. The most appropriate focus as we come up to Rosh Hashanah within a few hours. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova Ta'ah. Lehitraat.